All right, let's talk about one of the most important, but maybe most misunderstood parts of your phone and your computer. It's really the secret ingredient to a speedy device, and it's very likely the reason your tech feels like it's been slowing down. Yep, we are talking about RAM.
I mean, you know the feeling, right? You're trying to switch between a couple of apps, maybe from your email to a map, and suddenly, everything just stutters and lags. Or worse, you go back to an app you were just using and you have to watch it reload completely from scratch. So frustrating. Well, the culprit is almost always a lack of RAM.
So to figure out what's really going on under the hood, we first have to understand what RAM is even doing. You can pretty much think of it as the command center for everything you're actively working on.
Okay, the absolute best way to think about it is this. RAM, which stands for Random Access Memory, is your device's digital disk. It's not where you store things forever. No. It's the active workspace where you put whatever you're using right this second.
I mean, it's a pretty simple idea, right? If you have a tiny little desk, you can maybe work on one or two things before it just gets totally cluttered and messy. But with a huge desk, oh, you can spread out your laptop, your textbooks, your notebooks, all at once, no problem. More RAM is just a bigger digital desk for all your apps.
Now, this is where most people get tripped up. They'll see these big storage numbers, like 256 gigabytes, and think their phone should be blazing fast. But what's happening is they're mixing up the desk with the bookshelf.
The difference is actually really straightforward. RAM is the desk. It's super fast, it's temporary, and it only holds what you're working on right now. You turn off the power, poof, the desk is cleared. Storage, on the other hand, that's your bookshelf. It's a bit slower to access, but it holds everything permanently. Your apps, your photos, all your files. And here's the absolute key. Your processor, the brain of the device, it can't work directly from the bookshelf. It has to pull things onto the desk first to actually use them.
So, what happens when your digital desk just isn't big enough for what you're trying to do? Well, this is that tipping point. This is where you actually start to feel your device slowing down.
So what's the chain reaction that happens inside your phone or computer when it hits that limit? What happens when you ask it to juggle more things than it has workspace for?
Okay, here's exactly what happens step by step. First, your device tries its best to juggle everything. When that doesn't work, it starts force closing apps in the background to free up desk space. That's why your apps have to reload all the time. Then, as a last resort, it will actually borrow space from your slow bookshelf, your storage, and pretend it's RAM. This is called virtual memory, and trust me, it is painfully slow. The end result of all this, that's the lag, the stutter, and the app reloads that drive us all crazy.
And look, this isn't just some abstract tech theory. The amount of RAM you have has a direct, very real impact on your day-to-day experience. Let's look at what some of these numbers actually mean in the real world.
If you've ever used a budget smartphone and just felt that constant, annoying lag, 4 gigabytes of RAM is almost always the reason. It's just not a big enough desk for modern apps. You can probably do one thing at a time just fine, but the second you try switching between even a few apps, you're going to trigger that whole slowdown sequence we just talked about.
Okay, now let's jump over to a PC. For gamers, 16 gigabytes is pretty much the standard these days. And why is that? Well, because a modern game needs to load massive worlds, these huge high-resolution textures and complex character models all onto the desk at the exact same time. If you don't have enough RAM, you get stuttering and crazy long load times. It's just a terrible experience. And what about the pros? The creators? Now we're talking 32 gigabytes or even more. If you're editing 4K video, your computer literally needs to hold multiple video clips, effects, and audio tracks in RAM just to play them back smoothly in real time. This is the ultimate big desk scenario where your performance is directly tied to how much workspace you have.
Okay, so that brings us to the big question, the one you're probably asking right now. How much RAM is actually right for you? Let's break it down with a super simple guide.
Let's make this really simple. If you're a basic user, social media, email, web browsing, you can probably get by with 4 to 6 gigs on a phone and 8 on a computer. But if you're a student or a professional who's always multitasking, juggling tons of apps and browser tabs, you should really be aiming for 8 gigs on your phone and 16 on your computer. That's the sweet spot. And for all you gamers and creators out there doing heavy-duty tasks, you're going to want 12 gigs or more on your phone and at least 32 on your computer for the absolute smoothest experience.
And now for maybe the most important piece of advice in this entire explainer. On most modern devices, and I'm talking especially about phones and newer, thin laptops, the RAM you buy is the RAM you are stuck with forever.
You can't upgrade it later. So when you're making that choice, you really have to think about what you'll need, not just today, but a few years down the road.
So let's just boil it all down. RAM is the desk. Storage is the bookshelf. A bigger desk means you can work more smoothly, and not having enough desk space means you're going to have a frustrating mess of lag and reloading apps. It's really that simple.
Which really just leaves one final question for you to think about. When you consider how you use your devices today and how you think you might be using them tomorrow, did you buy a big enough desk?